Hey guys, it's Hillary. Welcome back to my channel, Enneagram Coaching. Today we are going to go over the mistypes of the type 6. But first, I'm going to order some coffee from Starbucks and we're going to go get it. Alright guys, so I'm back and I have my coffee. It is a coffee frappuccino, I think blonde espresso with almond milk. I like it. I can't say I love it. I have really struggled to find a drink that I love at Starbucks. If you guys have any ideas, leave them in the comment section below, because although I hate trying things that are new, I will try some if they sound good. If you leave them in the comments below. I don't like it too sweet. I don't want a ton of calories, but I want it to be, you know, good. I want to have a signature drink that I can just go get at Starbucks. I tell you guys, every time I find a drink I love at Starbucks, they discontinue it. That's how I feel. So it might not be true, but so, all right, but before we start, don't forget to subscribe and push that like button. Guys, that is helping my channel so much. I'm really appreciating it. Today we are going to go over the 6 and the common mistypings of the 6. So I'm going to take that, you know, type 6, the Loyalist, and pair it against every single type on the Enneagram. And we're going to discuss, you know, if it's a common mistyping or not common mistyping. But before we get started into the 6, I want to go over why do people mistype. And one of the big reasons is because it has to do with your own self-awareness, your own ability to be honest. A lot of people take these tests and they're like, they think that this test is like the first one is them. That's not true all the time. Tests are not as accurate as you would think they are. I always say, take the test and it's gonna eliminate like 6 solid ones usually. And then usually you'll have a top 3 where you're like, oh, I kind of feel like a little bit of all 3. And then from there, we'll look at the cores, the core fear, core desire, core weakness, core longing, and go from there. So just a little tidbit on when you're trying to figure out your type, look at that. And then also for the 6, it's a little different because you need to look at the counterphobic 6 and the phobic 6. So you have to go a little deeper in that. And I think I'll actually just do a full teaching on that coming up, because I think there's enough to teach on. But if you're wanting to know more about the 6 and who the 6 is, I have a wings video. I have an interview with a type 6. Go watch those. I'll link a couple of those down below if you want a more in detail look at the type 6. But because today we're just gonna go over the 6 versus all the other types. So, okay. Oh my gosh, I am rambling. Let's get started. Let's start with the type 6 versus the type 1. Okay, so the type 6 versus the type 1. So this one can be a common mistyping. I would say they both have really strong inner critics. I've heard that a lot. You know, a lot of types have inner critics, but the 1 has one inner critic themselves. It's an inner critic in their head, and the type 6 has a committee. They have a committee of inner critics, and so that's a big difference between their inner critic, if that makes sense. And so if you're trying to decide between the 2, I would look at like, do I have like a committee up there? Are they all telling me different things, or do I just have one inner critic? That can distinguish between the 2. I will say a social 6, they could be mistyped as a type 1. A social 6, they need to know the rules. They're looking for safety and security and certainty, but they really want to follow the rules like that type 1 would. But the difference is the social 6, they do it because they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to get in trouble with authority or anyone. And so that's their driving motivation. A type 1, they do it because it's the right thing to do. And so that's a little bit of a difference between the 2. Now I'll say a self-preservation 1 can look like a 6 because they both deal with worry. The type 6, they're going to worry before, during, and after. And they're not all the time going to realize that they're worrying, to be honest with you. But they're doing this so that nothing bad happens, right? So that 6 is always worrying what's happening before, during, and after, so that nothing bad happens. And the self-preservation 1, their worry is it more has to do with so that everything will be done perfectly. So it's a little different, right? They want it to be done perfect, and so they have more concerns about that. They don't want any mistakes made. But the difference is once they have a plan, they usually won't worry anymore. Versus a 6, they'll continue to. So that's like a, you know, they both deal with it, but it's a little differently thing. The last thing I'll share on this mistyping is that type 1, they're in the gut triad, so that's their first instinct, and the type 6, they're in the thinking or head triad, and so their first instinct is to think about everything first. I would say when they're both planning, because they're both planners, you know, that type 6 is gonna think with their head to make the plan, and the type 1 is going to be more out of their gut. And so that makes them a little different. And so that kind of wraps up the type 6 versus the 1. But I will say, I did just notice that a lot of my language is on the subtypes. I think a lot of this video will have that. And if you don't know what subtypes are of each type, every type has a subtype, a self-preservation type, a social type, or sexual or one-on-one type. It's called a SP, SO, or SX. You'll see that out there in the Enneagram world. I will be doing a video soon on that, and so stay tuned. I just wanted to like kind of explain why I keep using subtypes when talking about mistyping today. But let's move on to the type 6 versus the type 2. So this one is not that common. It can happen, you know, especially if you have a type 6 that really is a helper. They can kind of mistype and think that they might be a 2 just based on a few keywords, but I will say it's not that common. A big reason I would say is because their motives are different. But this is another one where the subtypes play a big role in you know, looking at these two types. And like I said, the 6s are more likely to think that they're a 2 than the other way around. You don't necessarily have a 2 wondering if they're a 6, but you might have 6 wondering if they're a 2. So I would say the self-preservation 2, they're a little bit more anxious than you'll find the social or sexual 2s. And so they share that in common with the 6, that anxiety, that anxiousness, because they're trying to get protection from others. And so that makes them similar to a 6. I think I would look at the triads here because the 6 is in the head, the 2 is in the heart. They both can be warm and friendly and kind, so they both have that in common. But the 2s being in that heart triad, their motivation comes from wanting others to love them, right? And that 6 in the head triad, they're more seeking belonging and security. And so while they're both warm and friendly, they both have different reasons for why that can be. In a nutshell, that first instinct, head and heart, they are different, and there are different reasons why. I would say if you are trying to decide between these two, look at what each one does under stress. That 2 goes towards the 8. The challenger, and so they become more challenging, more demanding of others and stuff like that. And the 6, they go towards the 3, right? And they all of a sudden become more anxious about achieving things and success and different things like that. And so under stress, they both behave very differently. And so if you are struggling, I would say look at that. Look at what you do under stress. But let's move on to the type 6 versus the type 3. So confusion between these two types can happen, but it's not that common. They are in what we call the triangle, the 9, 3, and 6 triangle. They do go towards the 3 in stress and the 9 in health. And so that 3 and that 6, you know, if a type 6 is feeling stressed, you know, they're going to have these type 3 qualities. And if the type 3 is doing really well and healthy, they're actually going to look more like that type 6, those healthy qualities of the type 6. So that would explain why, you know, you might have difficulty knowing if you're a 3 or a 6. I would say look at how they both deal with feelings and anxiety. The type 3, they are notorious for having a mask on. And what that mask is, them wanting to, they might be struggling with anxiety, but they won't let others know usually. They'll keep that mask on because, you know, in the end, they want to be seen as having it all together. So even though they might have some anxiety, they want to come across as having it all together. You know, when I said the 3s need to be seen as having it all together, this will actually depend on their level of health. So if they're super healthy 3s, they're gonna have taken the mask off and let other people in and stuff, but average to unhealthy 3s are definitely keeping that mask on and wanting people to think they have it all together. And then the 6s, how do they deal with that anxiety and those feelings? Well, their head is always spinning, right? They're always feeling anxious and anxiety, and they're more worried about, you know, having concerns. If there's danger, maybe they need to be problem solving, those kind of things. That's where you're going to see a little bit more of that anxiety in them. And they're more reactive. Even the phobic 6 and the counterphobic 6 actually are more reactive on how they are. They both will react right away, and neither one of them will be concerned on how they're coming across or how they look, versus the 3. They are going to be concerned about their image. So, and the last thing I'll say between these two is 3s. They are way more concerned about getting the job done, accomplishing the goal, finishing the task, and they like having a plan. But usually it's because that means there's a goal to be accomplished. And so what's driving them is getting those goals accomplished. Now you go over to the 6, they love to have a plan, right? But they are way more concerned about the whole planning process and more interested in that versus the goal. They want the goal, don't get me wrong, but the planning process comes before the goal. They're problem solvers. They are gonna go down all the paths available to them and play them out and make sure there are no issues along the way. And so that's a difference between the two. That's a big difference between the two. Anyways, that's the type 6 versus the type 3. Let's move on to the type 6 versus the type 4. So this one's not common, but definitely can happen, especially if that type 6 is the more creative type. But the type 6 will lack the 4's self-absorption. So you know that 4, they are looking inward a lot, and the type 6 not as much. And so that can be a difference between the two. A huge difference is a type 6 is not going to want to be stuck in feelings and longings and just sitting there. And the 4, they're going to want to sit there, they're going to want to process them, play them out. And so that's a difference between the two. A 6, they look for what can go wrong, right? And so they can change it or they can challenge it. 4s are looking for what's missing that they can find that will bring them fulfillment. And so they're both looking for different things. I would say 4s and 6s don't give away their trust easily, so they definitely have that in common. Both types appear intense. The 6s are more intense mentally, the 4s are more intense emotionally. And so they're both intense, but the reason why is different. And then let's look at the head and heart triad. So the type 6, they're in that head triad. I've already said it so many times. They are thinking all the time, right? They're in their head. They're thinking about thinking. They don't have a lot of downtime and relaxing time. Depending on their health, right? And so they can go towards that 9 and get some of that downtime and relaxing and health and take on some of those healthy attributes. But for the most part, they're always thinking about thinking. They're in that head triad. The type 4, they're in the heart triad. They relate to everything emotionally. And yes, this can lead to them thinking about it excessively. That does happen. But their first instinct is feeling it, sitting with it, not thinking about it. They will think about it, but their first instinct is the heart. It's the feeling. It's the emotion of it. So that makes them different. So anyways, okay, let's move on to the type 6 versus the type 5. So these two can mistype. They're both in the same triad, that head triad, the 6 and the 5. So an intellectual 6s, which a lot of them are, can think that they are 5s and not 6s. They can mistype as that 5. I would say 6s are more practical than 5s. Both can be analytical, thoughtful, hesitant to take action. 5s, they have that analysis paralysis then where they can overthink because they don't feel like they have all the knowledge. They need more, they need more, they need more because they need all the knowledge in order to make that decision to move forward. And the 6s, and it's more of the phobic 6 actually, they will overthink because they're afraid of things going wrong. I will say 5s have more of a delayed response when dealing with feelings. They definitely have feelings, but there's more of a delayed response. They're not going to actually, they might be in the room, maybe something happens, you're not going to actually see it on them. Their feelings, but they're gonna go later on and deal with it. And the type 6s, they react immediately and often with intensity and fear. And so you could see that on the 6 versus not really on the 5. And the 5s, they trust their own mind. 6s do not trust their own mind usually. Usually the 6s, depending phobic or counterphobic, definitely phobic are more like, oh, what do you think? What do you think? What do you think? Now, it's not that they're super trusting, but they might trust other people's opinions before they're going to trust their own. And the last thing I would say is that they share wings. And so that actually can play into them mistyping because the 6 can have a 5 wing and the 5 can have a 6 wing. And if you're wondering the difference between those two, I have the wing videos for the type 5 and the type 6, and that will give you all the information you need. I'll link both of those down below. But let's move on to the type 6 versus the type 7. They are very different, but they can mistype. They have wings in common, 6 wing 7, 7 wing 6. Again, I have those videos done, so go watch those if you're trying to decide between the two. Both are in the head center, so they have that in common, and both react to fear, but they both react to fear differently. 6s respond to fear by being careful and watchful about themselves and others and their environment. And so they are way more willing to just be careful about the whole entire thing. Security is extremely important to them. 7s run from their fear, right? And so all this like, that piece of the 7 where they have to have more adventure and more experiences and fun and pleasure, and they're running after that. And usually, depending on their level of health, they're probably running after all that so they don't have to deal with the fear that is inside them. A 6 always thinks about what's going to go wrong, right? They're always like, okay, they're those worst case scenario thinkers. They're thinking, okay, what can go wrong? Let's prep for what can go wrong. 7s, they're like hardly ever thinking about what can go wrong. They're the ones that are reframers. They're gonna, any negative situation or anything like that, they're gonna be like, how can we reframe this and put a positive spin on it? They're not looking for what can go wrong, versus the 6 definitely is. All right, so let's move on to the type 6 versus the type 8. So this is where that counterphobic and phobic plays a huge piece. Now, the 3 and the 7 a little bit too. I didn't go over it as much, and I do want to do a whole separate teaching on it, so don't worry. I will do just a full separate teaching on the type 6 counterphobic and phobic, because I'm definitely not able to share a lot about it today. But when you're dealing with the type 6 versus the type 8, that counterphobic can play a big part in being mistyped as an 8 or a counterphobic 6. So I will say that it's more likely for a counterphobic 6 to mistype as an 8 than the other way around. The counterphobic 6 and 8, they do both look alike. They're both aggressive, challenging, and confrontational. They both seem fearless and will fight for what they believe in. What's different about them though is 8s, they think that they can handle whatever comes their way. They're not as watchful and careful as the type 6 would be, even the counterphobic 6. Because those 6s, they are still always counterphobic or phobic. They're still assuming things will go wrong. That counterphobic 6 will just, go right through it and not let it stop them. They are going to face their fears and go through their fears, versus the phobic 6, which the fear, they will be afraid of the fear and not usually be able to go through it. And the 6s, they're just always on alert and preparing, right? And so that's a difference between the two. And then I will say another big difference is their motivations. 6s, they're driven by that need to feel safe and secure in their everyday life, right? That's their core desire. And the 8s are driven by their desire to control their life. And so that's a big difference between the 6 and the 8. And so that's just a little bit between the two. If you're trying to decide between the two, I hope that helped you. But I can't say this enough. I'm going to do a whole separate teaching, because there's so much more that needs to be taught and said about the counterphobic and phobic 6s. So, but we got to move on, because guys, I make these videos way too long and I'm trying to make them shorter. I'm not doing a good job, but let's move on. Last one, to the type 6 versus the type 9. So this is a common mistyping. Again, they're in the triangle, the 9, the 6, and the 3. And so what that means is the 9 goes towards the 6 in stress. I know I've had people actually tell me, especially on YouTube, that I might look like a 6. But really, it's just, the only time I really look like a 6 is if I'm under stress. Otherwise, I am very like, la la la, go with the flow, no big deal. I am definitely not like preparing or anything like that. But I actually am gonna do a video. So I haven't let anybody know about this really, but I'm gonna do a video on, am I mistyped at the end of this series? I'm gonna go through the different types that people have said that I look like, and we're gonna compare them to the type that I am, at least I think I am, right? And we're gonna get down to the bottom. Am I in this type? So stay tuned for that, but let's keep going on the type 6 versus the type 9. And the other arrow that they have in common is the 6 goes towards the 9 in health. And so a really healthy 6 is gonna have a lot of those 9 qualities and attributes, and so they can kind of look like a 9 at times. In a nutshell, some elements of the 9 and the 6, they definitely are in each other because of those arrows. I will say 9s, they have a way easier time relaxing than the 6s might. 9s, they go with the flow, they take things as they come, they're easygoing. 6s, they're on high alert. Yes, this depends on their level of health, I get that. But they're for the most part, they're on high alert, they're tightly wired, looking for danger, worst case scenario type of personality. And 9s only do this if they're stressed out or they're extremely overwhelmed. I know when I get really overwhelmed, I definitely, find myself super stressed out and I'm going towards the average unhealthy side of the 6. And I would say, look at how they both handle conflict. That might help you decide between the two if you're trying to decide between a 6 and a 9. 6s, they're more intense and willing to do conflict. This is not a big fear of theirs. Conflict is not a fear. They're more intense. It doesn't matter if you're a phobic 6 or a counterphobic 6. Conflict is not a big deal to you. Versus the 9, it's our core fear. We're like, no conflict at all. They don't want to do conflict at all. Why? Because our inner peace will get disrupted. So we are afraid of conflict, which is a fear, which, can look like a 6, but it's not. It's one of our core fears is conflict. The next thing I would look at if you're trying to decide between the two is trust issues. 9s, super trusting. I trust anyone, guys. It doesn't even it's very rare that it even occurs to me not to trust somebody. 9s are not guarded. They'll trust about almost anyone. I know I trust anyone. I always assume the best. I always trust and assume the best. So the type 6, they definitely have trust issues. And this actually will depend on if you're a phobic 6 or a counterphobic 6 on what it looks like. The phobic 6, they're gonna trust others a little bit better before trusting themselves. But they're still, on a high alert and trying to decide. They're not just like, oh yeah, I trust you first. They're like, they might actually trust you before they trust themselves, they're not necessarily just looking to trust anyone at any time. And the counterphobic 6, they usually won't trust people very easily, and they're always watching for who they can and can't trust. And so that's a big difference between the phobic 6, the counterphobic 6, and the type 9. And so yeah, so that's it. That's all I have today for all the mistypings of the type 6. I hope this helped you if you have been trying to decide between a 6 and any other type. If you have any questions, if you're like, wait, I still have one more question between this and this type, leave it in the comment section box below and I'll try to get to it and answer it for you, because there's so much more to this, right? I just cover such a brief teaching on each number because I don't want these videos to be too long. But I definitely want you to find your dominant type, your core type, the one that you most lean towards in your life, the one that you used as a child, but that helped you cope and feel safe and secure. So it's important to find that dominant type. And so that's why I do this, right? But anyways, that's all I got. And next week I'll cover the type 7 mistyping. And I think all I have left is the type 7 and 8. So we're almost done with this series, guys. I hope you've liked it. If you have, give this video a thumbs up. And if you want to hear more from me and you're enjoying these videos, subscribe. I really appreciate every single subscriber that pushes that button, guys. It means the world to me. And the last thing is, if you want to follow me on social media, I'm Hillary_McCaskey_coaching. That's my personal Instagram account. My Enneagram Instagram account is Enneagram and Coaching. And then if you want to find me on my website, I'm EnneagramandCoaching.com. Those are 3 great places that lead straight to me. So it's been fun. It's been awesome. I love you guys. I love type 6s. Thanks for watching this, guys. And until next time, bye guys.